There is a country that has defied more United Nations resolutions than any other nation in history, a country that possesses nuclear weapons, but has never been inspected, never been sanctioned, and never even officially admitted it. A country that receives more American financial aid than any other nation in history, $158 billion and counting. A country where criticizing its government's policies has been conflated with hatred, making honest discussion almost impossible. This is not a video about religion. This is a video about power, money, land, and the most consequential political relationship of the modern era. To understand what Israel is today, you must first understand what existed before it. In 1900, the land known as Palestine was home to approximately 500,000 people, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities living together under Ottoman rule. It was not an empty land. That claim, that Palestine was a land without people, was a political slogan, not a historical fact. Palestinian farmers had worked the same land for generations. Olive trees that took a century to grow passed from father to son. Jerusalem was one of the most sacred cities on earth, holy to three religions simultaneously for over 1,000 years. The Jewish population of Palestine in 1900 was approximately 8% of the total, living peacefully alongside their Arab neighbors. This is the starting point, not because it makes the story simple, but because without it, nothing that follows makes sense. In Europe, a political movement was growing that would change this land forever. Zionism, the movement for a Jewish homeland, was born not in the Middle East but in Vienna, Budapest, and Basel. Its founder, Theodor Herzl, was an Austro-Hungarian journalist who had watched anti-Semitism consume Europe and concluded that Jews needed their own state. His motivations were understandable. The persecution of Jews in Europe was real, brutal, and centuries old. But the solution he proposed, like a Jewish state in land already inhabited by another people, would create a conflict that has lasted over a century. Herzl himself wrote in his diary, "We must expropriate gently." He knew displacement was part of the plan. The question was never if the Palestinians would be displaced. The question was how and when and who would help make it happen. The answer came from the most unlikely place, a letter written by a British foreign minister to a member of one of Europe's most powerful banking families. That letter would set in motion a chain of events that the world is still living with today. November 2nd, 1917. World War I is raging. Britain is desperate. British Foreign Secretary Arthur James Balfour writes a letter to Walter Rothschild, the leader of Britain's Jewish community. The letter is 67 words long. It promises to support the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. 67 words, written by a country that did not own Palestine, promising land to people who did not live there, without consulting the people who did. Britain had a problem. It needed American Jewish support to bring the United States into the war. It also needed to outmaneuver France for control of the Middle East after the war. Palestine was a strategic prize, a land bridge between Europe, Asia, and Africa, sitting above the Suez Canal. The Balfour Declaration was not an act of generosity. It was an act of imperial calculation. Even within the British government, officials warned that the declaration would cause decades of conflict. Lord Curzon, a senior British minister, called it a policy of which we shall bitterly repent. Palestine's Arab population, 92% of the total at the time, was not consulted, not informed, not considered. When Palestinian leaders heard about the declaration, they sent formal objections to London. They were ignored. Britain was simultaneously making promises to Arab leaders that Palestine would be part of an independent Arab state after the war. They were promising the same land to two different peoples at the same time. When the war ended, Britain took control of Palestine as a mandate territory and had to manage the contradiction it had created. They managed it for 30 years. Then they simply left and let it explode. After World War II, the full horror of the Holocaust was known to the world. 6 million Jews murdered. The moral case for a Jewish homeland had never been stronger. The urgency had never been greater. In 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine, 56% of the land to a Jewish state, 43% to a Palestinian Arab state. Jewish leaders accepted the partition. Palestinian leaders in Arab states rejected it, arguing that the majority population could not be given the minority share. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. 11 minutes later, the United States became the first country to recognize it, a recognition that shocked even some American diplomats. For Jewish people who had survived genocide, this was the fulfillment of a 2,000-year dream. Their joy was real, and it was earned. For Palestinians, that same day has a different name. They call it the Nakba, the Catastrophe. Between 1947 and 1949, over 700,000 Palestinians, more than half the Arab population, were expelled from their homes. Over 500 Palestinian villages were destroyed, depopulated, bulldozed, erased from the map. Israeli historian Ilan Pappé, after studying Israeli military archives, called it ethnic cleansing, not war, not collateral damage, a deliberate plan. The plan was called Plan Dalet, documented, ordered, and executed by Zionist military commanders. Palestinian families carried the keys to their homes as they fled, believing they would return within weeks. 75 years later, their grandchildren still have those keys. They have never been allowed to return. The Nakba is taught in Palestinian schools, commemorated every year, documented by historians worldwide. In Israel, until recently, acknowledging the Nakba was effectively illegal. The word itself was banned from textbooks. By the 1960s, Israel had survived 3 wars, built a functioning state, and set its sights on something more valuable than territory, the United States of America. The strategy was methodical, patient, and extraordinarily effective. AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, was established in 1963. Today, it is the most powerful foreign policy lobby in Washington. AIPAC does not donate directly to political campaigns. It does something more powerful. It tells its network who to donate to. Every major political candidate in America knows that opposing Israeli government policy means losing significant fundraising support. Senator J. William Fulbright, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said publicly in 1973 that Israel controls the Senate. Congressman Paul Findley wrote a book called They Dare to Speak Out, documenting how his career was ended for criticizing Israeli policy. He is not alone. The list of American politicians whose careers ended after criticizing Israel's government runs into the dozens. It is the only foreign government whose criticism is treated not as political disagreement, but as a form of hatred. Meanwhile, Israel's own nuclear arsenal, one of the worst-kept secrets in geopolitics, is never mentioned in these conversations. The political science professors John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt published the Israel Lobby in 2007, one of the most rigorously sourced analyses of this influence. They were immediately accused of anti-Semitism, despite both being respected academic institutions and their work being entirely documented. The conflation of criticism of a government with hatred of a people is one of the most effective political shields ever constructed. It has been used so effectively that even American presidents have struggled to push back against Israeli government decisions. Obama clashed repeatedly with Netanyahu over settlements. Netanyahu ignored him and faced no consequences. No other country on earth treats the most powerful nation in history this way, and gets away with it. In 1986, a technician named Mordechai Vanunu walked into a London newspaper office and handed them photographs. The photographs showed the inside of a secret underground nuclear weapons facility in the Negev desert, Israel's Dimona reactor. The Sunday Times published the story. The world learned that Israel had been secretly building nuclear weapons since the 1960s. Conservative estimates put Israel's nuclear arsenal at between 80 and 400 warheads. The real number has never been confirmed. Israel has never signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has never allowed international inspections. Every other country in the Middle East suspected of pursuing nuclear weapons, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, has faced sanctions, airstrikes, or invasion. Israel has faced nothing, not a single sanction, not a single UN resolution with teeth, not a single American ultimatum. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented American foreign policy called deliberate ambiguity. America officially pretends it does not know whether Israel has nuclear weapons, despite EYA reports confirming it since 1968. President Kennedy was the last American president to seriously push Israel to allow nuclear inspections. He died before he could follow through. After Kennedy, no American president has pressed the issue, not one, in over 60 years. Meanwhile, Mordechai Vanunu, the man who told the world the truth, was kidnapped by Israeli intelligence in Rome. He was taken to Israel, tried in secret, and sentenced to 18 years in prison, 11 of which were spent in solitary confinement. He served every day of his sentence. When he was released, he was forbidden from leaving Israel or speaking to foreigners. The man who exposed a nuclear arsenal was punished more severely than the country that built one illegally. He has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 46 times. He has never won. The committee has never explained why. Since 1948, the United States has given Israel more foreign aid than any other country in the history of American foreign policy. The total figure exceeds $158 billion. Adjusted for inflation, it is the largest wealth transfer between two countries in modern history. For decades, Israel received $3 billion every year, automatically, without conditions, without debate. In 2016, the Obama administration signed a new 10-year agreement, $38 billion over a decade, the largest military aid package in American history. For context, the entire United States foreign aid budget for Africa, a continent of 1.4 billion people, is less than half that amount. The aid is not given in cash, it is given in military equipment. And here's where it gets interesting. Most American military aid must be spent on American weapons, meaning the aid is effectively a subsidy to American defense companies. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, the biggest arms manufacturers in America, are among the biggest beneficiaries of aid to Israel. The aid to Israel is not charity. It is a business model that enriches American defense contractors while giving Israel military superiority over its neighbors. Israel is also the only recipient of American aid that does not have to account for how it is spent. Every other country receiving American aid must submit detailed reports. Israel is exempted by specific congressional legislation. On top of military aid, America gives Israel access to the most advanced weapon systems before they are offered to any NATO ally. F-35 stealth jets, Iron Dome missile defense, bunker buster bombs capable of destroying underground nuclear facilities. Those bunker busters, analysts have noted, are specifically designed for one purpose: destroying facilities like Iran's underground nuclear sites. America is not just funding Israel's defense, it is funding Israel's capacity for offensive war against its neighbors. And the American public, whose taxes pay for all of it, has never been asked to vote on any of it. In 1967, Israel fought and won a war in 6 days, defeating Egypt, Jordan, and Syria simultaneously. When the guns fell silent, Israel controlled the West Bank, Gaza, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. The United Nations immediately passed Resolution 242, demanding Israel withdraw from the occupied territories. That was 1967. Israel is still there, 57 years later. What has been built in the West Bank since 1967 is not just a military occupation, it is an economy. Today, over 700,000 Israeli settlers live in the West Bank, in settlements that are illegal under international law. The settlements are not random. They are strategically placed on hilltops to control the water sources, the roads, and the agricultural land below. Palestinian farmers require permits to access their own olive trees if those trees are on the wrong side of a settlement. Water is perhaps the most powerful weapon of the occupation. Israel controls 80% of the West Bank's water resources. Israeli settlers use, on average, 4 times more water per person than Palestinians living beside them. The movement of Palestinians is controlled by over 700 checkpoints across the West Bank, some permanent, some temporary, all humiliating. Palestinian goods cannot move freely, making a functional economy almost impossible to build. The World Bank has estimated that if the occupation ended, the Palestinian economy would grow by 35% almost immediately. The occupation is not a temporary security measure. It is a permanent system of control over land and resources, and it is funded, directly and indirectly, by American taxpayers who are told their money goes toward peace and security. But nothing in this story compares to what has been done to the other territory Israel captured in 1967, a narrow strip of land on the Mediterranean coast. Gaza, 365 square kilometers, 2.3 million people, one of the most densely populated places on the surface of the earth. In 2007, after Hamas won Palestinian elections that international observers called free and fair, Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade. The blockade controls everything that enters and leaves Gaza: food, medicine, building materials, fuel, people. Israel's own officials described the policy in a leaked document, putting Gaza on a diet, enough to survive, not enough to thrive. An Israeli court case revealed that the government had actually calculated the minimum caloric intake for Gaza's population. The UN declared Gaza uninhabitable by 2020. The deadline passed. People are still there because they have nowhere to go. Between 2008 and 2023, Israel launched 5 major military operations into Gaza. Each time the casualties were overwhelmingly civilian. Each time the world condemned it. Each time the American veto at the UN protected Israel from consequences. On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched the deadliest attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust, killing 1,200 Israelis, mostly civilians. The trauma was real. The grief was real. The fear was real. No honest account of this story dismisses October 7th. Israel's military response was the most intense bombardment of a civilian population in the 21st century. Over 45,000 Palestinians were killed in the first year. The majority were women and children. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes. America threatened sanctions against the ICC for issuing the warrants. A court that exists to prosecute war crimes threatened for prosecuting war crimes. For the first time in decades, the Western consensus on Israel began to crack. European nations, university campuses, and even American Jewish communities began to speak out. The question the world is now asking is one that seemed unthinkable just 5 years ago. For 75 years, the unconditional American support for Israel was the single most stable fact in Middle Eastern geopolitics. No matter what happened, settlements, blockades, assassinations of Iranian scientists, bombing of neighboring countries, America stood firm. But something changed after October 7th and its aftermath. The images were different this time, the scale was different, and social media made it impossible to look away. For the first time, polling showed that young Americans, under 35, viewed Palestinians more sympathetically than Israelis. College campuses across America erupted in protest. Students were arrested, professors were fired, donors threatened to withdraw funding. Harvard, Columbia, MIT, the most elite institutions in the world, were engulfed in debates about free speech, genocide, and complicity. 3 university presidents were called before Congress and destroyed politically for failing to say the right words about genocide. American politicians who had spent careers never criticizing Israel were suddenly facing constituents who demanded they do. Senator Bernie Sanders became the first sitting senator to call for conditioning military aid to Israel. His colleagues reacted as if he had said something radical. In reality, he was citing American law, the Leahy Law, which prohibits military aid to forces credibly accused of human rights violations. The law exists. It has never been applied to Israel, not once. Ireland, Spain, Norway, and Colombia recognized Palestine as a state in 2024. More countries are following. The ICC warrants for Netanyahu mean he cannot travel to most of the world's democracies without risk of arrest. The world that allowed Israel to act without consequences for 75 years is changing. Slowly, painfully, but changing. The Palestinian people, 75 years of occupation, 17 years of blockade, generation after generation born into statelessness, are still here. History is long, longer than any empire, any lobby, any military, any veto. And history has a way of asking the same question until it gets an honest answer. This video does not tell you what to think. It tells you what has been documented, archived, and in many cases admitted by the governments involved. The facts of this story are not anti-Semitic. They are not pro-terrorist. They are history. And history belongs to everyone. Wealth history, where the past explains everything you see today.